Now, the third thing we're going to talk about tonight is the nerve and blood pathways to the hands. And in my mind, this is the most important thing because if you don't think about this and you're not aware of it, you can so easily create pressure on those nerves and blood pathways. And we need to protect them at all costs. If we want to play into our 80s like my mother did playing the violin, we can't be having our hands go numb. And with all the other risks there are in our lives these days with technology and the lack of movement that we have in our lives, the sedentary nature of our lives, we need to be even more vigilant about this. So let's go back and let's take out your drawing that you made with your little outline here. If you haven't got one or you came in late, I asked you to draw what your conception of the bones was. So look at your drawing. Do you have the place where the upper arm bone, this is my left shoulder, where the upper arm bone joins into the shoulder blade? There's a little socket. You don't have this metal rod here, but there's a little socket in there about the size of your thumb where that arm bone goes in to the shoulder blade. All right. Did you have the collarbone attached to the sternum? Were you thinking of this whole unit as part of your arm structure? Did you have two bones in your forearms? Did you have the wrist imagined as several different bones moving together or one solid bone? If you have things in your drawing that are different from this, then those are what we call mapping issues. Your map is different from the actual structure, and you're going to want to work on it, as I had to do quite a lot, looking at anatomical models and pictures and videos and anything that you can find, feeling where those collarbones are, how they go out and join with the shoulder blade, and where the arm joints are, discovering all that and working on clarifying and refining your map so that you can then begin to use those arms. Because what we've discovered in body mapping and what the neuroscientists know now, they didn't used to know it, but they know it now, that our movement is governed by these maps that we have in our brains. So let's say you didn't know that your upper arm joint moved from here. You thought it moved from here someplace. And you're trying to move your arm all the time from a place where there is no joint. Well, that's kind of hard on your body. It doesn't really want to move that way. And so muscles start to do things that they're not expected to do. But when you say, oh, look at that, the joint is actually over here, you can, in a relatively short amount of time, with some real practice and real intention and real awareness, change the way you move that arm, change your map, and have a lot more freedom of movement. This issue of the collarbones moving as part of the arm structure is a huge one. It's something that you're going to want to ask your students about if you teach. Do they know that that's part of your movement? If you try to pick up the flute or the violin or any instrument without moving the collarbone, it's not going to feel very good. So just get a little idea of how your map was different and see what you notice. Make a circle of something, jot down what you want to think about when you're moving forward. So when we talk about nerves to the hand, what I really want to talk about is this area between the collarbone and the top rib. It's a very important area. The pathways of the nerves and the blood vessel is like this. The nerves to your hand come down from the neck, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. They come down, they go under your collarbone, but over your top rib. So you can see this on Zeke here. Under the collarbone, but over the top rib. Now, there's not a lot of space in there. About a half an inch, maybe, when you're just sitting like this. If you're slumped, there's going to be even less space. If you're trying to hold yourself up with your back muscles and you're pressing a little bit here because you're kind of tight, there's going to be even less space. If your shoulders are pulled forward or up and you're tightening your neck muscles, there's going to be less space. So that's really important. Now, if you look at the black lines there, those are the blood vessels, and they come up from the heart, which is on your left side, behind the ribs, then they wrap over the ribs and go under the collarbone and move into your arm. The major nerves and blood vessels to your arms have to go through this space, and it's what we call the thoracic outlet. When it gets really bad, people end up having to have the top rib taken out because it gets in the way and presses on those nerves. It can cause a tremendous amount of pain and disability and problems when there's too much pressure on those nerves. Now, there's a lot of other places where nerves can be compressed in the arm and the hand, but this is the one I want to talk about tonight. There's incredible vulnerability there. Let me show you what the picture really looks like. Here's the brachial plexus. That's the nerves that come out of the side of your neck. And look at how they kind of overlap and interweave. There's a beautiful sort of backup system of how all these nerves work together so that we don't get in trouble too often. I love it. It's just gorgeous. Now here's a picture of all the nerves, all the major nerves to the body. And you can see, again, the nerves coming out of the neck on the side here, and then moving into what I call an incredible traffic jam. I mean, isn't that amazing that all those nerves have to go into this tiny little space? I think it's the only design flaw in the human body. Well, maybe 5,000 years ago, it wasn't a design flaw because we were mostly, lifting rocks and moving trees and digging holes and doing things that didn't cause us to do this. But boy, does that look vulnerable. And we need to take this really seriously. I believe that we're going to have an epidemic of hand and arm problems in probably another decade because of all the time that people are spending doing things in this forward position. So how do we keep pressure off those nerves? That's the big question. How do we allow that space to be there? I wanted to show you one other thing. This is the carpal tunnel. Now, there is actually a tunnel in the wrist, and I'm going to show you. I think you can see it here. You can see this indentation right where the wrist is. That is the carpal tunnel. And some of the tendons to your fingers, the connection between the muscles and the fingers, the muscles that move your fingers, go through that space. And that major nerve, I'll go back to this other picture for a second. Whoops, hang on. The nerve that goes through that is when you look at the arm nerves here on the screen on the left, the middle nerve goes right through the middle of your arm. That's the median nerve, and it's the median nerve that goes through the carpal tunnel. Now, notice how your wrists feel, okay? And just kind of move them like a Swan Lake dancer. Feel how fluid they can be. Now, go ahead and pull your arms up a little bit and tighten your neck a little bit, and move your wrists again. Can you feel the constriction in that movement? Can you feel the constriction in your entire arm and all your muscles? When we start getting tight in the neck, it travels all the way down to the hand. And what can happen with the carpal tunnel is that tightness starts to irritate the nerve gets inflamed, presses against everything else in the tunnel, and then we have pain and numbness and a lot of trouble. So you can check this out when you're on your own. Play in a way that your arms are tense and notice how that feels in your wrists. And then play again with balance and support through your spine. Free that neck and that head. Let your arms feel nice and fluid and your wrists like swan-like dancers. And see what that feels like. Is that the way you normally play? Is that the way you normally feel when you play? It sure as heck wasn't the way I played. I was so gripping my flute and working so hard, way overworking for what I needed to do. You know, when I was a kid, my mother would sometimes take me in to see the Boston Symphony. And when I was a teenager, I was very passionate about music and I loved, musicians who move around a lot. And I wondered, how come the guys, they're all guys then, in the back of the seconds never move? And I thought, they are so boring. They're terrible musicians. They don't have anything to offer. It took me many years to realize that, oh, these are the smart guys. They figured out just exactly what they need to do to create the sound and the movement, the music that they want. And they just sit there comfortably in the back of their chairs, playing beautifully, because there are no slouches in the Boston Symphony, playing everything they need to play and not overworking. So we can move however much we want, but to be able to move in the way that gives us the music that we want, that movement can't be tense, can't be tight. So we're going to reflect a little bit on the vulnerability of the nerves to your arm and your hand. Go ahead and jot down a couple of things you want to remember about what we talked about. Whether you knew that the nerves go through that small space there, the incredible importance of protecting that space. If you have pain in your hands, if you worked with me, the first thing I would do is take a look at what's going on up here and how is the balance of your head and how is the freedom of your neck muscles in this space and the tension there, because any amount of tension here can cause problems. It's different for different people. Some people are very susceptible to this kind of nerve pressure, and some people can do terrible things to their bodies and never be affected by it. There's no accounting for that kind of difference. But those of us who are prone to pain and this kind of vulnerability, we want to really pay attention to this stuff. And we also want to educate our students about this importance. So I want to show you a couple of pictures of head balance, because it's really nice to see some good head balance. The thing about little toddlers is that their head is about half the size of their torso. It's huge. And does she look like she's working to hold up her head? Do her arms look tense or her neck muscles look tight? No way. Look at this little tiny baby. Just absolutely free movement of the head. You know how much work it is for those guys to learn how to lift their heads, But it sure doesn't look hard. I love this picture of this little beautiful child just bending forward slightly from the neck. Totally free torso, totally grounded, just absolutely beautiful. And here's my favorite picture. I got these all off the internet, so I thank the people who posted them on the internet because they gave me something to admire. This little guy, look at the size of that head. It's huge, but beautiful balance and movement, little tipping down of the head to look down at the instrument, gorgeous arm movement, no effort going on there other than what he needs to actually play that instrument. So these are little models for you to remember and think about what you can do, how you can recover the balance of your head and that ease of playing. So I want to give you kind of a big picture way to think about balance and support for your arms. Our arms and spine and this whole thing here is structured very much like the scales of justice, the Libra. I'm a Libra, so I like, balance, I like scales, whatever. But take a look at the scales and think about how all of this is dependent on the base of support. The bottom has to be stable, it has to be on level ground, and then you've got this column coming up the middle that's got to be very strong and solid and most of all balanced, because if it's crooked or weak in one place or off to the side, then the scales are not going to be balanced at all. And then how the scales are suspended from the top. So if we overlay the arm structure on top of that, we can imagine the feet and the legs and the spine coming up. We can actually imagine our head being on the top of that, supporting that arm structure, It's very important to be balanced so we can have free movement. And then, oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. Then the suspension from the head to the arm structure, that nice ease of free muscles just letting that arm structure hang, really hang from the head. So if you don't like that image, I've got another one for you. There's another structure to which we are similar, and that is the circus tent. So think about that pole inside that's holding up the star and the flag. It's got to be solid, it's got to be strong, it's got to be straight. And coming down off of that pole is the ring of the top of the tent. If the pole is crooked, that ring is going to be off balance. If the pole is off balance, the whole tent is going to fall down. So again, we have this core support through the middle, and then the arm structure that hangs off of that. So as we conclude and we think about how all of this works together, let's talk about what we covered and how we're going to use it. How does the way that you play or sing impact these things? How does it impact the nerve pathways, the nerve and blood pathways that we talked about? How does the way we play impact our head balance? Are we really keeping our head in balance as we play? Maybe we take it forward to look at something, or we turn to look at the other musicians, whatever we need to do. But we always come back to balance. It's like playing in tune. You get sharp, you know how to fix it, you go back in tune. We find ourselves out of balance, overworking, we come back into balance. And can you hear what happens to my voice when my head goes off balance? And then when I come back in balance, it's huge. And how does the way we play or sing impact support for our arms? Are we, even though we may not even know it, but most of us are actually holding up our arms in ways that we don't need to do, putting more effort into the arms than we need to do. These are really good questions to begin to ask ourselves. And then we want to know, well, how can we learn to notice this stuff? So I've got a couple of suggestions for you. Things you can notice while you're practicing. Can you get support from below so you don't have to overwork above? As I said before, I think a lot of this overwork up here is because we don't have the support from below. It's like trying to jump without bending your knees. You know, you're like, I'm trying to jump, but I don't have any buoyancy or support from below. So can we do that? Can we respond to musical and emotional stimuli with appropriate effort and intention? Now, there's a lot of tension in music. Music is all about tension and release, loud and soft, all these things we have to do. But how many times when we play loud, we play soft, do we create tension in our bodies? We have to be able to do these kinds of things in a way that an actor would. If an actor wants to get all sad like this, they can't do it by compromising their voice. Otherwise, they'll lose it. And that's what happened to Alexander. They have to be able to convey emotion without impacting the voice. So how do we, and it's different with every instrument, it's a little bit different with every person. How do we learn to play on our instruments loud, soft, fast, slow, without adding more work? How do we find just the right amount of work to create the sound that we want? And how do we change our thoughts so that we intend that? We make an intention of the sound being fluid and free, or the sound being edgy, whatever it is that we want in the sound, and then let our bodies learn how to do that. And the third thing is, can we continue to remind ourselves to enlist that core support through the front of the whole spine? If we don't have that, things up here are going to get really kind of messed up. So these are the main things that I want you to be able to think about noticing. The second one, I mean, all of this actually is really what I spend most of my time practicing. on. You can learn the notes. But it's really about, what am I doing when I get to that passage that's really hard, or that's really high, or really soft? How am I reacting with my body? I spent a lot of time practicing in my imagination, because that helps me figure out where I'm putting the extra work. I just kind of imagine everything that I would be doing. How many times have you practiced a phrase over and over, and then you get to try to play it, or you play it in front of a teacher or somebody else, and it all goes to pot? We want reliability. We want to know exactly what we have to do with our bodies to create the sound that we want. So, support free arm movement. That's my motto. Thank you, organicfunny.com, for this little picture. That's great. So, in summary, the three main things we've talked about. The arms are suspended from the skull. The balance of the head is essential for keeping those neck muscles free and the shoulder joints movable. And support for the head from the whole body helps keep the pressure off the nerves and supports that free arm and hand movement. I'll be sending you a summary of the text so you don't have to write this down. That's what we've covered tonight. Here are some resources that you might want to be able to use. Bodymap.org is the Andover Educators website. You can find all the body mapping books there, some great articles. I'm going to send you tomorrow handouts. There'll be a copy of those arms warm-ups that you can use, explains how to do all those. An article I wrote called, I'll send you a link to it, Navigating Embodied Practicing, which is all about how to use that imagination to practice away from your instrument so you can train your body to work better, freer, and more easily. And then I'll send you a summary of the text of the PowerPoint. The images are copyrighted, so I can't send you those, but I will send you the summary of the text, and I think that'll be helpful to you. If you find that this is useful and you want some individual help, what I wanted to do is offer some private coaching to you, and it's kind of a special one-time offer that for now, if you attended this webinar, you could do 2 lessons for the price of 1. Normally I have a sliding scale, but for this I'll just say you could have 2-hour lessons for $100, and I'd be happy to schedule that anytime you want. If you want to do that, all you have to do is go to my website, which is flutibia.com, go to the Skype page, read what it says about Skype coaching, and then email me to schedule a time. People really like Skype coaching because they can do it in the privacy of their home. They don't have to travel. It makes it really easy if you have that capability. So I just wanted to offer that to you in case it's something that would help you with the issues that you're dealing with. And now we have time for questions. Thank you so much. I've got one question already, and I'm going to try to address some of the things that came up as well. But please, if you have a question, send it to leapearson@mac.com and put webcast in the subject line. Okay, here's a question from Sam. Sam says, I was wondering if you could answer a very odd question. When I flutter tongue, a spot in my neck experiences a very sharp, almost sudden explosive pain. It's on the left side of my neck and about an inch below the ear. What is causing it? How do I stop it? That's a great question. And that's exactly the kind of question that we come up against in our practicing. It's the issues like this that just throw us, and we have no clue about what to do about this. Sam, the first thing I would do is take a look at the mapping of the tongue, and what's your idea of what the tongue is attached to? It's very easy to overwork when we're using the tongue, but remembering that the tongue is actually connected to that hyoid bone there. Remember the picture of the hyoid bone? And it's a whole collection of muscles. And you can just kind of put it out and bring it back. Stretch it out and bring it back. Probably, I'd really want to see you play in person, but my guess about what is happening in that is that there's some tension going on in your neck or your shoulders that's not allowing the tongue to work freely. So that, and maybe flutter tonguing is, it may be that there's something reacting there. I'd want to take a look at that and play around with the head balance and what you're doing with your arms and your hands and see if we could free that up a little bit. I can't tell you what muscle that is right now, but you might want to take a look at the muscles, look at the larynx and all the muscles around the larynx and the cartilage and how that whole thing is structured. This is how I learn stuff. I just dig out the anatomy book and poke around in it till I find out what's going on. And see what you can find out about that. Fortunately, we don't have to flutter tongue very often, but when you do need to do it, you need to be able to do it well. That would be great. A couple of other questions I thought I would address here. Reducing pain in hands and shoulders and nerve entrapment. So I hope this was clear that when we put extra work in the neck and the shoulder muscles, it can very easily lead to pain because we're asking the muscles to do things that they're not really equipped to do. Obviously, we want all of our muscles to be strong, we want them to be toned, but what we need in our muscles being toned is we need a lot of elasticity. We need a lot of movement possibility, full range of motion. If we're not doing things with the full range of motion of our arms and hands on a regular basis, we're going to create a lot of limitation, and the limitation increases over years. So if you have pain in your arms or your hands, first thing to do is to start getting access to that core support from the spine, letting your arms be suspended from the head, and then really trying to become aware of where you were overworking and how you were overworking. You might have to just play just the easiest possible note on your instrument, something like be a beginner again, and see if you can do that with the least amount of work. You know, in the flute, all you have to do is blow. It's just air that creates the sound. Same thing with any brass or woodwind instrument. You know, on a string instrument, how do you find the easiest way to create the sound that you want? And I often do this with folks. Take them back to the beginning of just making a very beginning sound and find out how easy it really is. And then we have kind of a baseline to compare to. Well, compare that to how I normally play. Oh my God, there's so much work going on. You know, have to figure out, and then we work in increments to get from one place to the next and keep an awareness. If we have, another question was about finger joint pain. If we have pain in our fingers, then if it's not arthritis, which it might be, and arthritis is an inflammatory disease, so we want to look at all those anti-inflammation issues that we can. But if it's caused by any kind of nerve pressure or lack of blood flow, then we want to look at the whole arm structure and its relation to the spine. Lots of times what's going on in your hand is the symptom and the cause is some complete other place. It's not actually in the hand. Sometimes it is in the hand, but in my experience, a lot of times it's not in the hand. A lot of people wrote in about keeping pressure off crucial nerves. Somebody wrote in about the ulnar nerve, which is the funny bone nerve, the one that's in your elbow, and that can get a lot of pressure on it from being pulled in here too much at the arm, and that kind of exposes the ulnar nerve a little bit. If there's tension in your arm muscles, the biceps, for example, I'll use my guy here. The biceps goes across two joints. It goes across the elbow joint and the shoulder joint here. So if that muscle is very tight and tense, it's going to affect what's going on in the lower part of your forearm and into the hand. If there's not a balance in muscle strength and muscle flexibility between the front and the back, that can cause a problem. So we want to go back. We go back to actually making sure that our bodies are working well outside of our instrument. So any other questions that anybody wants to email into me, I will take them. Otherwise, I'll give you a chance to jot down some notes, maybe take a look at your drawing again and see what you can find out from that. I'm going to escape and take off the PowerPoint and stop showing my screen and just show the video. So, hi everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm really glad you came to this webinar. And if you have any questions to follow up with me, please feel free to send them to me. And if you're interested, oh, good, we have more questions. Awesome. Amy says, how do you keep the shoulders down and not have your head twisted to play the flute? Seems like my head has to be cocked at quite an angle to be able to keep the arms properly aligned. That's a great question, and I know there's probably a lot of flute players here, so I will address that. We want to look first at language. So it makes sense to say keep the shoulders down, but in fact, that implies that we have to kind of hold them in a position. So we want to go back to thinking of just letting them be suspended. And I'll get my flute here for a second to show you this. I'm going to back up a little bit so you can see more. I did a study of what all the method books said about how to hold the flute a couple of years ago for a presentation at the flute convention. And it was very interesting. There were several that suggested, I think Rampal was this, suggested holding the flute like a clarinet or an oboe. So you get this sense of where your arms are and how the shoulders are in a natural position. You can bring them up and down so you really get a feeling of where down is, that it's not pulled down or held down, but it's just floating. And then just flipping the flute on your left hand to take it to your shoulder. It gives you a nice angle there. If you turn your head to play the flute, remember that it's not just the neck that's turning. If you just try to turn the neck, you're going to feel stiff. But if you think about the fact that that head is turning and the spine is reacting all the way to the tailbone, then you can turn as much or as little as you want, and just to the point where you can float the flute up. We don't have to do this. We don't have to do this, although a lot of people do, and you look at the pictures of the old guys playing in the orchestras, 50 years ago, they're all doing a little bit of this, but I don't think they practice as much as we do or as hard. It's a whole different thing nowadays. So you have to kind of play around with that, but you start with balance. You start with thinking about, okay, what's the best use of my spine, the best balance of my head, the easiest, freest way of using my arms, and try to bring the flute into that, because you can decide. And the other thing is, you don't have to have it in the same position all the time. You can move around here. You can move forward. When I was pregnant, playing a concert at 8 months, I had my flute way over here because there just wasn't any room for anything. And you've got motion, you've got available to move your head. There's a lot of things you can do to keep from getting stiff. And it's a little bit different for everybody. You can play around with it and see what works for you. But the important thing is not to feel like you have to hold your head in one position, and then to think about that turning of the head, part of the whole spine. You can play around with that, remembering that it starts up here between the ears and goes all the way down to the tailbone. So I hope that helps, Amy. I have another question. This is from Kathy, who says, I have shoulder pain in both shoulders, but especially in the right shoulder. Any suggestions? Oh, that's a big one. I think, I'm not sure which instrument you play, Kathy, but I'm going to just assume that you play the flute. But a lot of our instruments are asymmetric. The violin, the flute, it's a little easier for people who play instruments that go straight in front of us. if this were me, I would want to take a look at what am I doing with the rest of my body? When does the shoulder pain come in? Is it directly related to the instrument? Is it related to other activities? When does it show up? What makes it worse? Is it, the top of the shoulder, the back? Is it in closer to the arm joint? Are these pec muscles tight and pulling forward? If you have what we talked about at the beginning, the head pushing forward a little bit, and the trapezius and these muscles in the back getting really tight, that can pull in and up on your shoulders. One thing that's kind of fun to do, and it might or might not be useful, is to take, I'm going to grab something for a second, hang on. Take a couple of pillows or a pool noodle. See my lovely pillow there. Take a couple of pillows or a pool noodle and just gently put it under your arms. And see what that feels like if you rest your arms. Now, if you're playing the flute, you can play for a little while like this. You have to turn your head. And it helps you figure out how much work you're putting into holding your arms up. If I were there in person, I'd come around and put my hands under your elbows to see how much work you were using to hold up your arms. But, you can do this, with some small pillows as well. Just see what that feels like. I hope that's helpful, Kathy. That's a really big question. And the short answer is there's a lot of things to explore about what causes that and where it is and how to think about it. But I think if you start playing with the ideas that we talked about tonight, that you'll get maybe more information that will help you with what you're doing. Well, thank you very much for your questions. I'm so glad you joined me tonight. I'll be sending you a follow-up email tomorrow, and I hope to see you again soon.